All right, so welcome to our panel. Meredith Shay, owner of InCord, a second-generation manufacturer of custom safety netting solutions based here in Colchester, Connecticut. That's right, custom safety netting solutions made here in Connecticut. Graham Robinson, Senior VP and Global President of Stanley Industrial, a division of Stanley Black Decker focused on engineering, fastening solutions, pipeline services, infrastructure products, and aerospace manufacturing. And Jeff Varesio, Senior Director of Operations, Contract Manufacturing Surgical Innovations at Medtronic, one of the largest medical device companies in the world, making, among other things, cardiac devices, cranial and spine robotics, insulin pumps, surgical tools, and patient monitoring systems. Congratulate to all of you to being elected to the CBIA board. As I said, you each individually in your businesses represent all that's great about Connecticut and all that's great about the CBIA board and our members and the great corporate citizens that we're lucky to have in Connecticut. I want to start by asking you three a question that's very relevant with some news that we heard today, that Connecticut added 14,000 jobs. So our recovery rate is now at 66%, which is best in the New England states and well above the national average of 54%. We know businesses have done a lot to retain their workforce with PPE and reorganizing the factory and a lot of social distancing. So I want to ask, how has the pandemic affected your businesses? And in this concept of don't let a good crisis go to waste, what's the one positive thing you take from the pandemic, either personally or professionally? Meredith, you want to start us off?
Sure. So the biggest thing was when we realized that this was going to affect all of our staff, that we changed what our focus was. We threw out the playbook, we threw out the task lists, and we focused on how are we going to maintain our values and maintain our employees' safety while being an essential business in Connecticut. And it really brought everyone back to the core of what was so valuable and important in our business and in our communities, of staying together, even if that meant being apart, and really focusing on what made us a great company. I have to say that I think from a business standpoint, really understanding communication, how to communicate to people quickly and effectively on a variety of topics, not even related to the business, but about workplace safety and how everyone was doing and feeling, was a big change. We started blogs, we started videos, we started video conferencing, all these new tools that we really learned how to harness and use to our benefit to communicate better instead of more separately. Thank you.
Graham, how about you slide down next there?
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be a member of the board. At Stanley Black Decker, we had three primary focuses with the crisis. One was to keep our employees safe and ultimately their families. Secondly was to ensure business and ultimately financial continuity. And then thirdly, to support the community. And we put significant focus on all three. And as a business, it really resulted in significant improvements across the board. We operated more efficiently. We used technology in ways that we didn't use before. And all throughout, the impact has been pretty profound. In my particular business, Stanley Industrial, one of the things which we had to do was to figure out how we did more with less. Effective prioritization. So we implemented what we call the 80-20 operating system, which is really leveraging the Pareto principle, where 80% of the output comes from 20% of the input, to put myopic focus on what really matters and what really counts. So, we really didn't make this crisis go to waste, and we used it as an opportunity to repivot the business. On a personal level, the impact has been profound. Prior to the pandemic, which was coincided with when I started at Stanley Black Decker, I traveled 90% of the time. My family didn't know me. Now my children know me. They know my name, they see me. And it's an absolute transformation in that context. So being able to spend every day with my children is something which I found to be certainly extremely rewarding from the pandemic.
That's great, Graham. I was traveling about 3 weeks a month before the pandemic, and I know it's certainly challenging. I mean, people think it's very exciting to be traveling, but you obviously have spent a lot of time away from your family, and the pandemic gave us all an opportunity to spend a little bit more time at home and maybe have more family dinners. So, well said, Graham. Jeff, how about you?
Yeah, sure. So thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to serve on the CBIA board, and I'm looking forward to everything we can collaborate on. I'll start personally. So for me, pre-pandemic, there was a vague beginning and end to my day. Certainly I took calls at night, took calls in the morning, but once Medtronic decided to close its global offices, that vague beginning and end became very, very blurry. So I needed to change what I was doing personally. My work-life balance was way off. So I really figured out some tools and techniques on how to get control of my calendar a month, 6 weeks out, so that I was never surprised anymore. I was taking calls at 11 o'clock to solve an Australian supply chain problem, or 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. for something in China that needed to happen. So it's something that I've learned to take control of now, and it's a skill that I'm not gonna be lost on me in the future. Medtronic has an amazing emergency preparedness response center. It looks like NASA. We have Houston. We have a problem. I mean, there's screens everywhere, and there's a whole team sitting there. So I'll tell you that we were very well prepared for this. Medtronic took a very risk-averse perspective on this. We were one of the early adopters in the state, so we had the first screening setups on our campus in North Haven. We had the first testing setups as well in Connecticut. We've received some letters from the governor's office on our early preparedness and how well we helped our suppliers in the state and suppliers around the world globally to ensure that our factory workers are safe, and in turn our families. We definitely learned a lot about business continuity through this pandemic, and the organization is better because of it. We are looking now, when things like this happen in the future, how are we going to be able to sustain our global manufacturing footprint in the future? So it's really been impactful to both my company and me personally.
Yeah, and when we talk about adapting, look at the four of us here right now, right? We've had to obviously pivot, and we don't have our normal 500, 700 people in attendance at the Marriott a few blocks up the road, but socially distancing here, but still trying to have that interaction and conversation where people share best practices. And that's one of the things that amazed me during the pandemic, how folks just came together to talk about, here's what I'm doing, giving information, and really trying to help each other out. So it's Connecticut really is a leader in that, and I, Jeff and Graham, you both came back to Connecticut. Jeff, Graham, you came to Connecticut recently. Unless your accent's from the east side of Connecticut River, you sound like you may be from out of the state. But you both came back to Connecticut, and I know I did not see that in other places that I worked. That real collaboration and willing to share best practices. Is that something that's unique in Connecticut? Do you see that as well with your supply chains, Graham?
I've worked many different places before Connecticut. I was in Dallas before, I was in Charlotte, I was in Korea, I was in Boise, Idaho. I'm originally from Jamaica. So certainly the experience that I've had here is transcended anything that I've experienced before. And I have a pretty unique perspective. I started at Stanley Black Decker on April the 6th, which was in the middle of the pandemic, and I was based in Dallas, Texas. I probably could have easily continued to work in Dallas and maybe been as productive. I decided in July to move to Connecticut, which is where I'd have to be ultimately. And it has certainly exceeded my expectation in terms of, one, the collaboration which exists, the private-public partnership forums such as this, and really what we're doing at Stanley Black Decker in terms of the community and being able to emphasize and amplify that throughout the organization. So it's early days for me. It's about 3 months, but it's been absolutely enjoyable so far, and I'm thoroughly impressed in terms of the collaboration and the partnerships between the entities.
Well, we're fortunate to have you in Connecticut, and very fortunate to have you on the board. Jeff, coming back to Connecticut from Brazil.
I think if you look at medical device in Connecticut is kind of a hidden gem today. We've got a pretty broad base of suppliers that provide to Medtronic locally as well as globally, and they're well connected. You've got a lot of different, metal stamping forming organizations and advanced manufacturing engineering organizations that are all well connected in the state and talk. They talk about what it's like to do business with a company like Medtronic. Are we a good customer or are we a bad customer, right? So there's definitely a collective of manufacturers in this state that collaborate well together. And I think it pushes the technology in the state. That's how we're going to win, is technology. We're not going to win on manual labor where you've got to have 150 people on a manufacturing line. We need to win with technology to compete globally around here. So I certainly see that happening in Connecticut today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Meredith, just to pull you into the conversation, well, you may not have lived in Brazil or in Dallas and moved to Connecticut recently. The youngest member of our board, congratulations. And
Thank you.
We have this criticism of Connecticut that we can't keep young people in the state. And what's kept you in the state? What do you see that's been great for InCord to stay here in Connecticut?
So I came back to Connecticut. I went to school down south in Charleston, South Carolina, and decided to come back up here to work for InCord. I love the area, and I love the people. It's home. But the collaborations between companies, the communities that they've created, and the passion that the owners have for the businesses as well as the people, it really seems a lot more to me like the businesses have established themselves as a part of the community. And they take that role very seriously in Connecticut in a way that I didn't really feel entering the workforce, prior to this.
Yes, well said. To that point about what Connecticut has to offer businesses, this happened to us in 08 and 09 when I was in the private sector, and we went through that very difficult time, and we went forward with our strategy. We doubled down on our investments. And having been in this role for 3 months now, I've been fortunate to talk to some other companies who are doing the same during this pandemic. Staying with their investments here in Connecticut, breaking ground, if you will, additions to their facility, or even hiring people, or if they're not hiring people because their sector's not up, we're taking the slow time to train their workforce or relay out their factories. Are any of your companies making any specific investments to this during this time in Connecticut to come out of this stronger and better than maybe we went into? Graham, I'll start with you. Yes. I know Stanley's very active in Hartford.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing all the things that you mentioned. We recently purchased the aerospace manufacturer of fasteners for the aerospace industry, consolidated aerospace manufacturing, significant manufacturing presence here in Connecticut. And also we have the manufacturer, which is not too far from here, which is really an opportunity for us to showcase and also to enable manufacturing in the state, and something that we are putting much more investment in and much more presence around throughout. And then in terms of just how we do business and operate, not just Connecticut, but in general, but certainly in terms of our significant manufacturing presence here, we're investing heavily in Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 so that we are much more effective during these times, much more efficient. And manufacturing has really changed. And the pandemic has accelerated that change in a material way, in terms of really allowing us to do more with less, because we have no choice, and really providing a vehicle for us to enable the partnerships with the community that we have. And it's quite special in that context, in terms of really the opportunity that we have to do that, and just how well we can facilitate that throughout. So it's a crisis, but we're using it to the best of our ability, and it's been working out so well so far.
And Graham, you guys at Stanley, kind of something interesting, because traditionally, at least in Connecticut, I'll say, or if you look historically, manufacturing kind of been in the suburban, rural areas, and you guys are kind of really moving right into Hartford. You mentioned the manufacturing, so connecting the urban with manufacturing.
Yeah, and you, in the question before, you asked about what's special about Connecticut, and I'm relatively new to Connecticut, so I can't differentiate between whether it is Stanley Black Decker or whether it's Connecticut, but the confluence is pretty amazing, because that's one of the things which is a high priority of us at Stanley Black Decker. It's really investing in the cities, investing in Hartford. We're not too far from here, but we're making significant investments, not just in the manufacturer, but what we do in the community. We recently formed the business Higher Education Forum, which is really about digital credentialing, providing forums for community students to enter the workplace using digital credentialing. Really transforming in terms of how we're thinking about the community and how they interface throughout. And that all enables cities. Cities like Hartford, where it's the future. And our ability to leverage and take cities and big cities like this and use that to enable and provide the workforce of the future is really what it's about. And that's kind of how we see the public-private partnership all coming together. So it's really a very, very special opportunity that we have and one that we're taking advantage of.
Yeah, that you guys have heard me say, and we'll talk about it maybe in a little bit, but Connecticut will only be as good as our cities. You know, our cities, and if our cities are great, our state will be great. And Jeff, to that point, Medtronic's in North Haven. You guys are pretty close to New Haven. Are you guys looking at any type of investments right now during this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. First, let me give Joe some kudos. When we were in the state in New Haven was talking about shutting down the bus lines, about 30% of our employees come directly from New Haven on public transportation. So I went right to CBIA and asked Joe to help me with the policymakers to keep those lines open so we can continue supporting our manufacturing workforce. And Joe did just that for me. So I thank him for that. Few things. So Medtronic as a whole spends around, people recognize the amount of investment in Connecticut. We spend around $350 million. That does not include salary and brick and mortar. That's checks that we cut to suppliers in this state for services. Big suppliers like Hobson and Motzer and OK Industries that are part of CBIA. And also, so we spend a considerable amount of money in the state. Some significant investments that are real for us. We put a $30 million sterilization expansion onto our factory in North Haven, and it allows us to control all of our bioabsorbable materials. So there's a lot of smart people there, much smarter than me, that take chemicals and they make things that we turn into sutures and clips and tacks that absorb in the body over time. We need to control those from an environmental perspective, so we built a $30 million sterilizer on the site, and it's going to keep us compliant with regulatory and EPA compliances at least 15 years. The most exciting thing I want to talk about from an investment perspective is the number one largest investment in Medtronic is our robotic surgery platform. We are very close to having our first clinical robot. We've hired over 300 technologists, scientists, technicians, professional program managers, et cetera, right here in Connecticut to develop our whole robotic surgery platform. And excuse me. So we're on the verge of this, and that's a win for the state. It's a win for Medtronic, but most importantly, Medtronic makes the world's best medical devices. We're the world's largest. We make the best medical devices. We're gonna have some leapfrog technology in robotics. That's gonna be a win for our patients, right? So patient outcomes are gonna get better by the investment that we're making in Connecticut. So very significant.
That's fantastic. And you touched on it. I don't do too much of a commercial here, but tell people a little bit about the demographics of the Medtronics. We know Stanley Black Decker well, although I think we could promote Stanley Black Decker a lot more. I'm going to talk to Meredith in a second about her business, but I don't think people understand the hidden gem. Not only do we have down with Medtronic, but just the medical device supply chain. You mentioned a few of our members, how big it is in Connecticut. Just touch on that briefly. Yeah,
absolutely. So Medtronic in Connecticut is almost 3,000 employees on one campus. I think I may be correct on, there's over 50 languages spoken in our factory. So 50 different languages, which always blows my mind when I hear about that. We're a very diverse site. We manufacture everything from bioabsorbable sutures to laparoscopic staplers to all hosts of medical devices. And our robotic surgery platform is just our latest groundbreaking technology that we're going to go to. We have a broad supply chain in Connecticut. Medtronic wasn't founded, but U.S. Surgical started in Connecticut. U.S. Surgical is kind of the king of laparoscopy, so surgical stapling, and it grew and grew and grew, and the supply base within Connecticut grew around it. And those suppliers have benefited from being part of Medtronic greatly. So some of the companies that I mentioned, they sell products that impact patients around the world. They're impacting patients in Africa today, in China today. Medtronic products impact somebody every 2 seconds in the world. So it really is a broad, amazing company that we have a hidden gem in North Haven, Connecticut.
Yeah, as I said in my opening remarks, we're going to do a great job at CBIA of communicating that out. not just for public policy awareness to our lawmakers, but for every resident of Connecticut knows how great our businesses are in Connecticut.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk a little bit about what the impact is they have on the communities and the state as a whole. So Meredith, smaller company, but a lot going on at InCord. As I mentioned, I don't think people would think of safety netting being made here in Connecticut, and I've been fortunate to see some of your product, whether it's in the industrial building, and I think even you do some like playscape, playground type of netting. So tell us a little bit about InCord and any investments that you guys got going on in the state.
Sure. So we last year, I think we finally got our CO like on December 31st, but we built a new warehouse last year, which spread us out into 4 different facilities. One of our challenges as a small business is jumping into one large facility and finding that type of real estate in Connecticut in a location that works for our staff and where they're from. But this year, when the pandemic hit, we decided to continue our investment in research and development. We have a significant dynamic test frame that is outdoors, which is great, so that we were able to continue testing our products and pushing new product development without missing a beat. And then on the software side of things, we decided to fully implement a new CRM, which for a company our size, we thought it would be more challenging than it was, but the beauty of not having any salespeople traveling was that everyone was available all the time for the training and really getting the program to work. So what we thought would take a year ended up taking 4 months for us to fully implement a brand new CRM. We really think of our business as part of the community, and we have a strong belief that we're not only building it for ourselves and the current citizens, but also for the future generations. And we try to keep that in mind with what we're doing and how we're growing and making sure that it's sustainable for the business to continue, but also, our footprint in the communities that we're in.
These guys think it's tough running a big company and have them come and run a second generation family. I did second generation family owned. When you mix business with family, it's sometimes it can be oil and water, and sometimes it can be great. And so it's always a challenge, right?
There's many hats to be worn, that's for sure.
Well said. I want to touch on something that we did talk a little bit about, but talk more about. Jeff, you mentioned the transportation infrastructure that you needed in order to bus those folks from New Haven, working with Joe and CBIA, and credit to Joe Brennan. That guy is just amazing. And Graham, you and I were just talking a little bit about urban renewal. I want to talk about a Rebuild Connecticut policy pledge. These were solutions that weren't made by CBIA, but we went out and reached out to membership and our collaborators, and what they came back in order to rebuild our state stronger and better were essentially 5 areas. Workforce development, I'm sure that's one we could spend all day on. I'm happy to talk about it a little bit here. Taxpayer return on investment, urban renewal, infrastructure investment, and small business relief. When you look at those 5 buckets or the solutions that are under any of them, are there any specific ones that hit home to you? And Jeff, I'll start with you on this one, and then we'll go to Meredith and Graham. You can certainly reemphasize the infrastructure and transportation if you want, Jeff, or if there's another area that you hit home.
Yeah, so certainly that one is important to us for sure because of the diversity of our site, and we're so close to the city. But workforce development for me anyways, resonates. I talk with Jason Howie often. I was an executive sponsor for his, we have a strategic relationship management program, and I was Jason's sponsor for OK Industries for some time. And Jason would articulate to me the number one problem he has to growing his business is workforce development. How do we take advantage of the amazing advanced manufacturing programs that we have at the community colleges and get these kids in the high schools funneling into the advanced manufacturing programs? These programs will make kids ready to come out of them in a year or 2 years, ready to go work at an OK Industries or a Hobson and Montzer or a Lacey in Bridgeport. And how do we really tap into the urban communities and showcase what manufacturing looks like today? It's not the manufacturing that I was brought into when I graduated college, right? There's no oily presses. These you're working in clean rooms at this point, and it's a good career in this state. and it's going to be how we win in this state. If we, the state is steeped in history of manufacturing, from the brass industry to the eyelet industry, auto, goes on and on, aerospace. How do we continue that journey? We need to get young kids excited about working in manufacturing, and not engineering, and not always college, right? Manufacturing companies value those manufacturing technologists just as much as they do young engineers. So it's really a good career, and how do we get kids excited about doing that is something that I'm interested in helping.
And manufacturing has unbelievable career pathways too.
Absolutely.
You may come in as a tech, as you mentioned, which is a highly valued position. But your pathways are just, I've seen people go from literally a shipping and receiving clerk to a production manager to an ops manager to a CEO. I've seen people go from, somewhere on the floor to an engineer in the office or even in sales. Or it's just the pathways seem unlimited.
Yeah, Chris, I went to Waterbury State Tech for my first 2 years, right? Came out with a technology degree, then went to work. Then went to Central Connecticut State University, and then got my first job as an engineer, and then I went on to RPI and continued developing myself. So it's just an amazing pathway. We need to get kids excited about manufacturing.
Yeah, and one of the stats, I know Colin Cooper talks about this a lot, our chief manufacturing officer, is we have about 33,000 kids graduate our traditional school systems, comprehensive high schools every year, and about a third of those, so 9,000, don't go to 2 or 4 year colleges or go on to the military. So they're there without a pathway. And they don't even know anything about manufacturing unless we can get to the middle schools, even before high school, and talk to the teachers, talk to the guidance counselors, talk to the principals, and then they would have a pathway. Now we've got 9,000 kids coming into the Connecticut manufacturing sector, which would be a boom.
Absolutely.
So Meredith, how about you? Any one of the Rebuild Connecticut buckets jump out, and if you want to stay in workforce, we can.
Well, I have to say the R&D tax credits would be huge. It'd allow us to take some risks that maybe we would be a little bit more nervous about taking otherwise, just to have that benefit at the end of receiving those tax credits. The apprenticeship programs and working with the schools is huge. I grew up in Connecticut, and I went to school, a high school where many of my friends didn't go to college, and they thought there were no opportunities for them. So getting that message out that there are lots of businesses, and most of the manufacturers and the businesses here, they hire from within and they promote from within. So the opportunities that are available, it's not necessarily a straight path, but I was one of the people that went from a clerk to a production manager to an ops manager to CEO. So it absolutely can be done. And small businesses especially, you see that when they're growing quite quickly, that they're looking from within to be able to promote people that that can get the job done and understand the product.
One of the things I love about panels, you never know what people are going to say. So I'm really glad that you talked about the R&D tax credit. I actually thought one of the bigger companies would, and having been led a 150 person manufacturing business for 13 years, it was critical to us. I talk about that a lot because I don't think people understand what the R&D tax credit means to the small, mid-sized businesses about being able to take a risk on processes or product development with having a little bit of safety net underneath you.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a challenge with recording and understanding what is research and development versus not, but the ability to collect that data and then provide it at the end of the year and not have to pay the tax on, you get the tax credit, so you're not paying that tax money. It allows you to invest more money in R&D for the next year, for following years. And for a small manufacturer, we're not talking $30 million to develop something, but it's so substantial to us to be able to develop that new product that could potentially help us hire quite a few new individuals as well.
And become more rooted in the state. It's fuel
Absolutely.
for the small, mid-sized businesses. It fuels some of that innovation, some risk taking to develop a new product. Next thing you know, you've got a successful product or successful process, and you're growing. Your business is now expanding, and you're taking on more roots in the state, hiring more people, like you said, expanding the facility. I just don't think enough folks understand the importance of the R&D tax credit. Not only they always think it's the bigger organizations. Thanks for touching on that. That's a great one. Graham, how about you? Any one of the buckets jump out at you?
Yeah, before I answer that, I wanted to probably get back to your comments that you were making on manufacturing before. which is certainly something which I really have a full appreciation for. I probably have about 50 manufacturing facilities around the world, with a couple based here in Connecticut in my division. And at every one I go to, I have one consistent message, and I was in Danbury last night. And it's that, innovation and ideas could come from many sources. It could come from engineering, it could come from your product management team, it could come from your sales teams. But there's one consistent source that I found, and it's within the four walls of the factory. And our opportunity is to figure out how we harness that, how we craft it, and how we use that to drive future growth in the business. So I'm just a firm advocate and a huge proponent of the manufacturing and the fact that the skills that are being used are different in the future than in the past, but just how useful it is to driving growth in the business from an innovation perspective, which is the fuel for growth for most of our businesses. To your question, there are really two that stand out for us, and I alluded to them before: workforce development and urban renewal. And the two actually go hand in hand for us. The skills needed are different, so we have to dramatically put in place an ability to provide those skills that are needed. The skills that are needed much more in terms of artificial intelligence, the skills that are needed much more in terms of digital technology. It's dramatically different than what was before. And urban renewal, we're not far from here in the city of Hartford. We're investing a significant amount in terms of growth in Hartford, and being able to leverage the cities to provide the workforce for the future is what will differentiate us as a state, and it's what will make us supremely competitive in the future.
A huge opportunity in our urban areas, and thank you for Stanley's commitment, obviously, and all of you, your commitments to Connecticut, but certainly there's a big commitment in the urban area, and we're seeing some of that intersection, Graham, not only just on workforce and urban, but now workforce technology in the urban area, and you guys have it with the manufacturing, Makerspace CT, where we did our manufacturing summit from.
Yeah.
A lot going on.
All three are intertwined, because the technology is needed to enable the workforce, the technology is needed for manufacturing. So we tend to think about, certainly at Stanley Black Decker, people and technology being the core foundation for all the pillars. And I tend to affectionately refer to that as the soul of Stanley Black Decker, but it's the soul of really that public-private partnership, which is key for us in the future.
That's great. Let's continue this exciting part of, what all the solutions we have for Connecticut. As I mentioned in the remarks, we're trying to do everything we can to talk about the positive things businesses do for our communities and our state, and it's not just jobs and workforce, which is huge. That's just tremendous in itself. But I know, having been out in the private sector for the last 18 years, that your businesses and all of our member businesses do so much more. Whether you look at the back of a Little League jersey and you see the company sponsor on there, or the billboards in the outfield, or the playbills at theaters, or the food banks and the soup kitchen, especially with the holiday season coming on upon us. I mean, businesses do so much with charities. So just want to ask you, any of you, if there's anything specific that your businesses do, just as the great corporate citizens that we have here in Connecticut, for your communities, however little or big. But again, it's so amazing what our businesses do. Meredith, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So we're mainly located in Colchester, Connecticut, and we were able to partner with the town. We also manufacture playground equipment, and we were able to partner with the town. We provided the equipment, and they installed it, and so we were able to install quite a few elements on their playgrounds for the kids to enjoy, and it felt great to us to be able to contribute to the town that we lived in, and the kids of the families that worked with our company. We often enjoy doing the community type programs with the food banks, as well as drives for coats and blood drives, any sort of event that can really help us participate in the community. We try to do.
This type of stuff gets the little hairs on my neck standing up, because it's got to be so rewarding to kind of drive by that playground and see kids playing on the safety net that you guys worked with the town to put in.
It's huge for the employees. They are able to share with their families what they do every day, and there's a huge amount of pride in that. It's one thing to see a picture of what you do, but it really hits home when you see children playing on it, your own children playing on it, and you can share that pride of craftsmanship of what you've worked on and where you go every day.
That's awesome. Jeff, we'll go around the opposite way here. How about down at Medtronic?
Yeah, sure. So Medtronic is a very philanthropic company. Our founder, Earl Bakken, founded the company on the mission, the Medtronic mission, has not changed since 1960. There's 6 tenets to this mission. Tenet number 6 is to be a good corporate citizen in the locales or regions or states that we do business in. There's a host of things that Medtronic does let's talk about Connecticut. There's a project called Project 6 in line with Tenet 6. Any employee in the company can take up to 16 hours of their time and go work on a charitable organization. So if you want to go build a house for Homes for Our Troops, you can do it, and Medtronic will pay you to do it. So it's really, really useful, and almost everybody takes advantage of it. We have some amazing leaders at our site in Connecticut who are very focused on underperforming schools in the cities. So we host about 5 schools in New Haven that are underperforming, and we go there and we help them with resources. We help the teachers with resources. So we coach these kids. We offer them STEM programs. We have a program called FemSTEMs that's very focused on women in science, technology, engineering, and math. And there's a lot of different programs like that that are born from within the site themselves. They give us a lot of liberty to be able to help the locales that we do business in. They support us fully however we want to support. And the leaders in our site, so another one that I want to mention is the Women in Innovation. That's it's a subcommittee under CCAT and CTC, and many of the leaders, female leaders in our organization sit on that panel. We've got winners in our organization from the awards that they give out for women in innovation. So just really active participation from the leadership down to the associate level in Medtronic in all kinds of philanthropic activities in the state. So really proud of that.
That's tremendous. Graham, you guys are doing a lot.
Yeah, I wouldn't know where to start, but I will start. We have a 177-year-old, 177-year young company that's headquartered in New Britain, and certainly been through ups and downs, through many wars, but the commitment to the community hasn't changed over that time. And I'd say it has even been amplified more recently through the pandemic. And there are many things that have been done. I'll just mention 1 or 2. I mentioned the Business Higher Education Forum, and I think that really ties in well to what I mentioned on workforce development and urban renewal, and the digital credentialing that's facilitating. Immediately after the pandemic, we put in place a fund, a $10 million fund, of which almost half of it was based here in Connecticut, to really provide food, to provide opportunities, PPE, for employees. And the last thing, which is the one that I'm arguably the most proud of, even though all are great, is while in the initial stages we all provided PPE for our employees, one thing we quickly realized is that our employees are part of a household and a part of a family. So we pivoted pretty quickly to really enable and provide PPE for the family and healthcare when needed for those members of the family, so that we could ensure that once they go home, they're in a relatively safe environment, and their loved ones are safe also. So the history that Stanley Black Decker has had to the community, to providing philanthropic, is really superb, and certainly one of the things that I'm extremely proud of, being part of the Stanley Black Decker family.
Wow, that's amazing. What all 3 of your companies are doing, obviously, in different scales, it's just it's tremendous. And again, that's the key, to let folks know that businesses aren't the enemy, right? They do so much for our communities and for our state, and there's just so much opportunity there. It's really inspiring. So thank you all for kind of sharing that story. It's a side of business that a lot of people, I think, either don't recognize or don't see all the time. Businesses are kind of those quiet leaders. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, Chris, I'd love to highlight something that was very impactful to all of us. So when Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, we've got 3 manufacturing plants in Puerto Rico. It was devastating. The factories were down for months. The people didn't have food, they didn't have shelter, they didn't have a place to clean themselves, wash their clothes. So Medtronic took responsibility. We helicoptered in generators, 50 washers and dryers, food, and we set up our factory as a home. So the employees of the company can go use our factory. They can get money out of the bank on site, right? Because it was a little scary, dicey down there at the time. There was some challenges from a law and order perspective. So the company just went above and beyond. Every employee got a generator, and it really was, when you watched it in motion, it really impacted you, the Medtronic mission, right? It's a little cultish, the Medtronic mission. You think about these 6 tenets that we try to live by, and then when you see it in action, you realize what Medtronic does for
And businesses don't have to do this. It's
Yeah.
right, but they want to. They're firm believers of making their communities better, making their states better, their workforce. Meredith talked about it, making something to make the employees proud of. Making the product alone, it should make the employees proud. But just that, it's fantastic. It's inspirational. So thank you all for sharing the story. We're running out of time. I want to thank you all again for joining the CBIA board. Congratulations on your election and for your thoughts tonight. It's inspiring stuff that we've been talking about today. The hard work is ahead of us, and I really look forward to working with the 3 of you to help make our state better than we were going into the pandemic. So thanks again for joining us.